Hello everyone, and welcome back from your Thanksgiving break. I wanted to give a few tips on the C minor etude tonight, and I'll be switching back and forth between flute and piccolo because I know there's a lot of piccolo players who are about to have their first audition on these etudes, and flutists who are going to have either their first audition or their second phase. And so we're going to start with selecting a tempo for the C minor etude. So what I have my students do is, let's grab my piccolo, I have them play the line that they really don't like, which is the line that begins on measure 34. I have them play that for me, and as soon as they finish the phrase on the line that begins in measure 34, I have them start right at the beginning with no pause. So it would sound like this. And so on and so forth. So I have them start on their hardest part, or the part that they're the most uncomfortable with, to set the tempo, set the sound, and immediately go to the beginning or to a specified cut that I've given them. That way, they are thinking about their hardest part, they are setting a tempo, and the best thing is that they're actually playing the hard part before starting at the beginning of their cut or the beginning of their etude. So that's the first tip. Play the hardest part aloud in your practice to set your tempo. The second one will be for flutists on the very first note, that low C. Oftentimes, if the sound is not coming out, the flutist is either trying to blow too far down, like the blowing into a jug sort of embouchure, hoo hoo, and so you don't really get much tone. That sort of sound. What that means is the aperture is just too wide, so they have to close their lips. And an easy way for flutists to close the lips for that low C is I have them start on a G, but I have them place their pinky on the low C keys instead of on the E flat key. So they press down the low C keys, play a G, and then just put down one finger at a time, like so. And that becomes a warm-up for them. They can make little tunes, little melodies with that. And then you can skip notes or skip the scale and just play from G to C. And then you start on G, but don't sound it, and just play the C. And that just happens to be the first two notes of the etude. And so on. And now, so for measure 2, I always have my students do this before they even start. Before they play any note, just get some grease from their nose or their forehead and rub it on those pinky keys down here. That makes low C to E flat slide much easier because there's less friction and a little lubrication. So get some grease from your face, we all have it, rub it on the metal, and that just makes it easier to slide the pinky for this low C to the E flat. Now for the piccolo players out there, since you're not playing the low C, I would recommend playing every C that you're taking up an octave louder. Just play it louder. Oftentimes it's at a forte. The first note is definitely forte. The next time you have a C is the end of a diminuendo, a decrescendo, but you could go back to forte. Starting forte, crescendo, decrescendo, forte. It helps with the intonation and it'll help with your confidence. So just loud C's on piccolo. And then, especially that last C, loud, because it's at the top of a crescendo, and it'll just help stabilize your tone. The next, I have two more tips. One has to do with rhythm. the triplet rhythm in measures 11 and 13. Just ensure accuracy. 1 take, 2 take, 3 lolly. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Count the rhythms aloud. Ensure that you're playing 2 groups of eighth notes, 1 group of triplet. And be sure that in in measure 9, all of the notes are just eighth notes. There's no triplet. So don't confuse measure 9 with measure 11. The rhythms are different. Last tip is for practicing measure 34, the line that starts on measure 34, and actually the 4 measures prior to it. There are crescendo, decrescendos written in the 4 measures prior to line 34. Be careful to actually play a crescendo, decrescendo, and not just an accent on the top note. At the auditions 2 weeks ago, I heard a lot of accents on top notes and not leads or raises in the volume, or raising the volume toward the top note. So just ensure that you're playing a crescendo and not a subito or an accent. Excuse me. Versus okay, crescendo, not accent. Also, piccolo players don't need to breathe as often as flute players because their instruments are smaller. So if they're having trouble on one part, it may be because they don't need to breathe, but they think they do. So perhaps if there's a part where one of your students is just having difficulty and it has to do with breathing or timing, tell them not to take a breath and see if that helps them. So those are my tips. I hope they are helpful to you and your students. Please share this with all of them. Share it on your band pages, like it, share it with your band director friends, your flute teachers, everyone. And I hope you all have a wonderful night.